The following presentation is a production of Ride the Wave Media.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the KAYA Kommunity podcast. Woo-hoo. My name is Kambria Davis, and I'm super excited to have this very first episode of the KAYA podcast. So, man, where do I start? This podcast has been close to 7 years in the making, in the sense of I've been wanting to do a podcast. I've been talking about it multiple times. I'm like, podcast is coming. And then I don't, for whatever reason, launch it. And yet, here we are, finally, after long awaited time. So, thank you for being here. I want to give a little bit of a background about myself and share with you guys, just be super transparent and vulnerable about why some of the reasons are it's taken so long. One of the most immediate things that I recognize is I have been having sinus and allergy and congestion issues for a little bit over a year now. See, hear that? And I've kind of been in my head about starting a podcast with my voice not sounding the same as it normally would, or not being able to breathe very well. And, just totally transparent, it's like that has kind of prevented me from wanting to do this. Thinking, oh man, I'll wait. I'll launch the podcast when I can finally breathe normal. And some hours I breathe normal and some hours I don't breathe normal. So that's been in the way. And I recognize it actually just doesn't matter. So there's a lot of information there. I think, we can totally dissect that and say, we'll always find a reason. Or it's like, well, people, if I'm going to do a podcast, I got to have my voice like this and I want to be able to speak and I don't want to be sniffling. And you should really make sure that the sound quality, and nobody wants to listen to somebody who's stuffed up and sniffling. And that's just not true. So that's kind of one of the reasons. Another reason is just life, right? As a lot of you who have attended any of the KAYA community events or retreats or Zodiac nights, close friends and family even, it's been an interesting 2 years for me, a little over 2 years. And quite frankly, I just have not felt like myself over the last couple years. And that has also led me to a place of being like, how do I launch a podcast if I still don't feel like I'm where I want to be, or I'm not feeling totally myself? And the reality is we are never the same person, right? We constantly evolve. We're constantly changing. I'm not who I was 2 years ago. I'm not who I was 4 years ago, 10 years ago. My core and my soul's essence is the same, but my actions or life or day to day might be different. And so waiting for me to all of a sudden come back to who I was before my grandma passed and before I got in a head-on collision and got super sick and went through a really personal breakup, it's not going to happen, right? It's not going to happen. So here we are doing the podcast now. And this podcast is not professionally recorded. I mean, MK, who's behind the camera and the sound, is killing it. And I appreciate her and Alex getting this thing up and going, putting up the little camera and at least making it feel more professional. But I want it to just be super real and raw and genuine, as it's me just trying to talk to you guys, because I've spent a decent amount of time engaging with people on social media over the last several years as well. And that's kind of just like a lot of areas of my life. That's an area that I'm like, do I still enjoy being engaged in social media? Some things, yes. Some things I don't like. Some things I'm super over, and some things I really appreciate. So anyway, here we are doing the podcast. I literally think I said here we are 4 times already. Anyway, so this is it. This is the podcast. But these are some of the things that have happened. And, just to give you guys insight again into the last few years of my life, I've had some really big shifts and changes. There's been a decent amount of loss and a decent amount of grief. And for anybody who's experienced loss and grief on a deep level, I'm sure you understand that it's difficult sometimes to really put ourselves in a position to be so vulnerable, or to really step out and find ways of still honoring that grief and that loss and moving forward in a direction that feels good to our souls, right? So a little bit about me personally. I don't even remember the dates. I mean, I started working in corporate America probably in my mid 20s, working for Best Buy, working for Verizon, and then going to school. Initially, I wanted to be a school teacher and teach history because I love history and coach basketball. It's one of my many, many passions. And then I realized halfway through going to college, I would be fired easily the first 2 days for saying the F word too many times. And I live in Utah and I'm a lesbian. And so I'm like, okay, lesbian teacher in Utah, 15, 20-ish years ago also felt really scary, as well as somebody who cusses a lot. So I was like, this isn't necessarily the right path. And at the time I worked for Journeys, which is a shoe store across the country in malls. And that is kind of where my corporate America life took off. So I did that job and I worked for that company for just over a decade. And there's a lot to go into about that job. But I did that for a good chunk of time. And so from going from high school athlete, student body officer, to working in corporate America, to coaching basketball, playing basketball, it's a lot of masculine energy, right? A lot of action, a lot of doing, a lot of going after things, a lot of fighting for things, being aggressive, being assertive, being that strong, powerful woman. I'm super competitive. So working in a job that was based off results was phenomenal for me at the time. And back in about 2016, I think, when did I leave Journeys? 2016. So I would say probably 2015, 10 years into that position I was a district manager at the time. I had 100 plus employees in 5 states, working literally 75 hours a week, carrying 2 phones, work and personal, not to even assume that I had a personal life back then. It was really intense. And so 2015, my soul and my body were not in congruence, right? My soul was calling for more. I knew that this is what's not working for me anymore. So eventually I ended up leaving that job, and that felt like almost like a divorce. Like, again, this huge transition. So much of my identity relied in that business and that job and that position. And I went from waking up at 7 o'clock and answering 15 emails and getting in the shower and driving to the mall and just constant manage, take care of people, do all these things, to silence. I left that job. I was single at the time. I left that job and got rid of my work phone. And overnight, I went from so much happening all the time to total silence. When that happens, you have a total personal, I don't even know, what is the word I'm looking for? Like a crisis, like a personal crisis. Like, who am I? What do I offer to the world? What do I bring to the world? Who am I without this title of district manager and without running a corporation and all of these things? And that led me to energy work. That led me to Reiki. That led me to astrology. That led me to all of these things that now are a huge influence on my life and how I live, and things that 10 years ago I would have totally laughed at. And I would have been like, nope, that is not real. That is cuckoo cuckoo. And it doesn't even make sense. Whereas now it's totally what I live in. So I left that company. My life got very quiet. I spent a lot of time hiking. I spent a lot of time reading. I spent a lot of time just like being, going to lunch, going to coffee, spending time with people and being with them, and like not being with them, but being on my phone 24/7. Like, oh yeah, but actually being with people and being present. I had no idea how to be present up until 7.5 years ago because I was constantly managing so much. So income energetics, incomes and astrology reading. And I just start toying with it, right? I don't just like jump all in and be like, oh, this stuff is perfect for me. This is exactly where I want to be. I just start allowing things to move differently in my life. Flash forward to now, and I incorporate astrology. I live through the energetics. And when people are like, what is your podcast going to be about? Right? Podcast people are like, well, what's your niche client? What's your niche target people? What are you going to talk about? What are you an expert in? It puts a lot of pressure because I'm like, I wouldn't necessarily consider myself an expert in fucking anything. I just have a lot of thoughts, opinions, and experiences in the world. And so I just was like, cool, I want to talk about them and I want to share and I want to bring perspective to people that maybe they're not thinking about, right? I want to bring a different side to things. I know for me, I was introduced heavily to astrology through my brother, and I knew him and I loved him and trusted him, but he had been in the world of energetics and healing and spirituality and astrology long before I had. But I trusted him, so I was open. And what the goal of this podcast, one of the biggest desires I have with coming on here, and sometimes it'll be me by myself, which you guys is kind of awkward, like just talking into a microphone by myself, looking at a camera. Like, let's just call it for what it is. It's a little bit weird. And I'm a Leo, so you would think, oh man, she loves to be behind a camera. Give me some people and it's a different story. So I'm going to work through that. That was also another reason why starting a podcast. Podcast. See, normally they would edit that, right? But I actually don't want us to edit it, MK. I want the fuck ups. Because in life, we fuck up, and it's okay. Things are not what social media shows us. We stumble over our words. We have sinus freaking problems for a year and we don't know why, right? We say shit we don't mean. We say shit and are like, oh God, is somebody going to get offended? Like, we're just human. And I'm just human trying to humaning like everybody else. But the goal of this podcast mostly is to just have a connection with people and give people a different perspective or an opportunity to talk about life through energetics, right? I have a lot of experience. I have a lot of gnosis, if you know the word. I have a lot of inner knowing about a handful of things like astrology. I have gnosis around relationships. I have gnosis around the energetics of money and business. I have a lot of experience in being a successful entrepreneur, as well as a successful district manager for a multi-billion-dollar corporation. So I have this business experience. And I want to be able to offer people the opportunity to move through life less on autopilot and our conditioning and more through the energetics. And I think that's really kind of as I've shifted over the last couple of years. I've done moon ceremonies. I've done meditations and early morning sadhana. I've done Kundalini yoga teacher training and Reiki training and sound healing and retreats. And I love doing all of that. And this podcast, this concept of being able to jump on and interview people. So that's another thing. I'm going to bring guests on and I would love to talk to people about what they're into and have people ask me questions about some of the energetics or how I live and want to be able to spread this information. So that's a little bit about me. I wanted to kind of fill y'all in because I do. A lot of people are like, hey, where have you been? Hey, when's your next retreat? When's your next event? What's been going on for you? And I've been in a space, right? Some days I'm like, hey, jump on and share a lot about my life and get on Instagram, or I have the energy to get out and spend time with people. And then there are days where I just can't and I don't. So I want to be super authentic in this. I want to let people into what's been going on. And I want to be able to share with people how your life can benefit from moving through the energetics, living life through an energetic lens, not just what we've been conditioned to do. And when I say energetics, everything is energy, right? We give energy, we receive energy. And when people are like, what do you mean? You can feel when somebody walks into a room, right? There are certain people, they walk into a room, you can feel, boom, you feel their energy, right? And it could be really great. And you're like, oh, or there could be an energetic exchange that you're like, oh, that doesn't feel right. Or you go into a situation or a store or a job or something and you're just like, energy. And so the other energetics that we have are the cosmos. What is happening in our universe, right? So I'm going to repeat this many times throughout the podcast, but what I want people to think about when I start to talk about astrology and the cosmos, because many people will be like, it's not real. First of all, astrology is not a belief system. It is a language. It is a language of the stars that has been around for millions of years, long before any of us, okay? People have been tracking and chasing the moon and the stars and the sun and using it for how they grow food, how they navigate the planet, how they navigate the oceans. So this is not a new belief system that everybody loves on TikTok and it's like, well, it's just random. This is an age-old language. Second of all, if you are not sure about astrology and be like, it doesn't make any sense. Here's for my scientific people or my more logical thinkers. Do you believe there's a moon? Okay. You're like, yes, there's a moon. We can see it in the sky. There's a moon. Cool. Have we proof that the moon affects the tides of the ocean? If you don't believe in this, just feel free to go to any ocean and spend a decent amount of time there and you will watch the tide come in and come out. Come in and come out. So even if you don't believe in science, you could just plant your own feet on the sand and feel the tides come in and out. That is the gravitational pull from the moon. So if the moon's up there and the moon we know for a fact affects the tides of the ocean are made of water. Yes, you got it. Water. And what are we made of as human beings? Also water. 70%, some would say up to 90%. Depends on who you talk to. The majority of our body is made of water. So if the moon in the sky affects the tides in the ocean, which is made of water, how can we possibly not make sense of the fact that the moon affects us as human beings? Talk to police, talk to firefighters, talk to people. I have a dear friend who works in the psychiatric unit in a hospital here in Utah, and she will tell you around full moons, they overstaff, right? They add staff. Any person working in hospitals or jails will tell you around the full moon, we are overstaffing. We are prepared. So this is not Kambria is making it up or all these people in astrology and TikTok are making it up. This is proof. And the reason being is the moon affects the tides, which are water. We are water. The moon has an effect on us and our emotions. And if the moon has that and it's sitting up there in the universe, in the sky, of course, every other planet has some effect on us. Okay. So in this podcast, I'll be talking things astrology. I'll be talking things relationship. I'll be talking energetics with money. And kind of the common theme throughout it all will be the energetics, right? How to recognize and be intentional with our energy as we move through life. So I'm super grateful for everyone who's ever believed in me starting this podcast. There's been so many of you who are like, oh my gosh, that would be great. I can't wait. You should totally do that. And not even just with the podcast, I'm super grateful for anybody who's believed in me or has attended any KAYA events and has believed in this vision of KAYA. KAYA, K-A-Y-A, stands for Kome As You Are. And that's exactly why, barring a few things, these podcasts are really not going to be edited because come as you are. Me, I've got sinuses and I can't breathe, right? I've had a very interesting but mostly sad and hard and heavy couple years. I curse like a sailor and I am far from fucking perfect, but I have a good heart and I care a lot about the human experience. And I have watched how the energetics and astrology and shifting and being in tune with the cycles and the rhythms of the cosmos has super impacted my life and made it so much better. And I want to be able to share that with you guys. And sometimes I'll just have a podcast because quite frankly, I'm very opinionated. I have a lot of fire in my chart and I got a lot of shit to say. So great. Technology gave me a platform to say all my shit. Podcasts. So anyway, thank you all so much. I can't wait to dive into these things over there. I also think we're going to get to a point where we kind of do like a Dear Kambria. And I want you guys to send in stuff. We'll figure out a way to do it anonymously. Or we'll just figure out like, hey, I've got this situation. I think that would be fun. I am not a professional or an expert. I'm just a human who's been humaning. And I've had a lot of experience in these things. And I have a gnosis and I just want to share it with everyone. So I think that's it for now. That's like the first little episode, give you a background of things to come. Also, don't hesitate to hit us up on Instagram at KAYA Kommunity, K-A-Y-A, community with a K, because Kambria, right? Kambria is with a K. So I know some people are like, why do you do that? It's probably super annoying, but I love it. I love it. So hit us up on Instagram, or you can email at comeasyouare@gmail.com and let me know like what topics or things you're curious about. What would you like me to talk about? Do you have any questions? And then I'm super excited for bringing on different guests who will have different things, and we're just going to take this down the road and see what comes of it. So thanks for tuning in, y'all. Super, super grateful to be here. And I guess that's it. Have a great night. Sat Nam.